Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Astral Perceptions Show. My name is Mark Johnson. I am your host, and this is our premiere episode here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Now, I know a lot of you may also know me as the co-host of the Paranormal UK Radio Show, which airs weekly here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. This is a brand new show, something I've been wanting to do for quite a while now. I've been wanting, while we talk a lot about the paranormal and ghosts and UFOs and all sorts of strange things over on the PAUK show, I wanted to do a show that is more spiritually based and focuses on other types of subjects that are more related to, and I hate using the word spirit, but I think that's the closest I'm going to come to for now. I was going to call this show Unrealized Realities originally, and I'm still going to be focusing a lot on what I consider to be reality, which is not what we're taught reality is. We're going to be looking at a lot of different types of theories, ideas, things to expand our minds and to look at life from a more higher spiritual level. One of the problems that we have living in this existence is we become so focused on the physical world that we live in. Here in America, and I live in northern New Jersey, as many of you may know, for any of you new listening to the show, even though this is a English radio station, we still have a couple of American hosts, and but you know, this is a world subject for all of humanity, not just any particular audience, because we're going to be discussing a lot of different cultures, a lot of different spiritual ideas, a little bit on religion, but you know, only from a spiritual point of view. I'm going to do my absolute best to keep politics out of this, but yet I'm going to be focusing on things that are happening in the world right now, which sound very political, but there are other ways of looking at it. One of the things that we're dealing with right now, there is a lot of anxiety and fear being spread, especially here in the United States, in the Western world. All sorts of things are going on. We've been dealing with over a year now of this pandemic, and people are worried about it. We've had people who have died. I know several people who have died from this. There are a lot of people that deny this pandemic is real. Well, yes, it is real. You know, when you have loved ones or friends who have passed away from it, yes, it becomes very real. Now, do I buy into the narrative that we're being fed? Absolutely not. And one of the ways that we're going to be talking about breaking free of looking at reality is by getting out of our heads, getting out of the reality that we've been taught all of our lives, and especially these last few decades, where we're being programmed, I believe, in a lot of different ways. And I can back that up too. But again, not being political, but being spiritual, and how we can look at everything that we're dealing with here on a spiritual level. Now, I'm going to admit it's taken me a long time to finally get off my ass and do this show. And yes, I swear a little bit here. Maybe some people may think that's not spiritual, but you know what? It's part of who I am. I'll try not to be too vulgar. But I do have a sense of humor. I do let a few curse words fly once in a while, but I'll try to keep this PG, you know, for younger audiences. But I've been as with a lot of people, I've been suffering from a lot of depression myself. I've suffered from depression my entire life. I have clinical depression. And I do take medication for it. And sometimes it works. And sometimes when life is really tough and gets you down, it really affects me. And I'll admit these last few months, I've been really, really affected and becoming overly concerned with all the craziness that's going on in this world. And I look at my fellow human beings and I'm wondering what in the hell has gotten into everybody. We're going to look at this because I've been taught a few things, and it's been a hard lesson to learn. I fought it. I keep allowing myself to watch the news or watch the news feeds or whatnot and let all of that fear that is being, pushed on us get to me. And today I had an epiphany, and it's allowed me to move past it and get back to my training, my roots, and where we are as spiritual beings, and getting away from the physical side of our existence. We are here for a purpose. We are here to learn. We are here to have experiences. I've had a lot of different experiences in my life. I've had a lot of what you could call paranormal experiences or spiritual experiences. And as we go forward in our shows, we'll be focused more on different types of phenomenon. And we'll spend more time on each one as a single subject. Tonight's show, we're going to do a kind of an overview of everything that I would like to talk about moving forward with this show. But for me, what's the most important right now to talk about and try to reach out to people is learning to move past the fear. The fear that is being thrown at us left, right, and center from everywhere we turn. And I'm going to ask people with very strong opinions who are listening to this show, give me a chance here. And if I say something that you start to become offended by, hang in there, okay? Because I'm not trying to offend anybody. I'm going to say it how things are. I'm going to say it how it is. And what I'm going to say is not just my opinion, but comes through spirit. And I've been taught a lot of lessons, and I've been directly talked to by certain beings that have kind of kicked my butt a little bit to tell me, what I needed. I didn't want to hear, but I needed to hear in order to get past all of this. And hopefully my words can affect other people, because that's been a great desire of mine, to talk with people and have us, all raise our vibration, all come and meet together as a human race and learn to get past the fear and the hate and all the insanity and craziness that is permeating our world right now. And part of that involves tuning it out. Stop worrying about things you cannot control. Big lesson I had to learn. I can watch things on the news. I can watch our politicians say things, and I want to reach through the TV and throttle them and shake them and say, what in the hell is wrong with you? I see the news media and how they portray and spin and work their stories from a specific narrow angle. And I'm not pointing out any specific network. They're all guilty of it. And this is somebody talking from a filmmaking and broadcasting background. I got my bachelor's degree in radio, television, film production from California State University, Northridge, my alumni. And I took broadcasting classes, and we looked at the news, and we looked how they formulate the newscasts and how things are manipulated and how much real news is in there and the slants that are put on the news. And I'm also speaking as somebody who has been interviewed and appeared on television shows and have been heavily edited, had my words taken out of context, had things spun in a completely different way. And you know what? It really, really grates you. But that's what happens. And which is why you cannot trust or believe everything you see or read or hear in today's social media environment, because it's all being filtered through certain perspectives, and a lot of it is being manipulated to force people to have certain opinions or fears. Fear sells. That's a very simple fact. If the news wasn't constantly telling you bad news, you would tune it out, because if everything was hunky-dory, well, then there would be no 24-hour news. And, news is run by commercials and commercial advertising, and that's where they get their money. It's a money-making business. It's not so much keeping the public informed. It's, they've got to make money to survive and keep going. And they'll do what they need to do in order to survive. So we have to look at the world around us in that manner. Politicians, the same thing. They do whatever they want to do to keep getting reelected and stay in power, because it's all about power for most of them. I believe there are some politicians out there that really want to do good, but I see so many out there that are just in it to glorify themselves or have that power and have that control. And again, we're looking at things from a physical human perspective. So let's take a step back. Step back here with me. Understand that you are a spiritual being. You are not just a human being, living a physical existence. You are a spiritual being having a physical existence to learn, to experience. I'll say right up front, reincarnation is a big part of our existence. Whether or not you believe in reincarnation or not doesn't matter, because there's going to be a lot of things that you will hear that you don't want to accept, you don't believe in. There are concepts that I've been exposed to. When I first heard them, I thought, what a crock of you-know-what. And over the years and over time, I started seeing and experiencing different things that has opened me up to accept new ideas and concepts that I resisted wholeheartedly before. That's not saying that you have to accept anything. Everyone here is on their own journey. Everyone here is living their own life, and you're here for the experiences. I'll share a little something with you. There's a friend of mine who is very, very, I hate using the word psychic. This person hates that word with a passion. But sometimes inadvertently, as we're having conversations, somebody else steps in. and I'm not talking to my friend anymore, and I'm talking to somebody else. And I've talked with several people who have imparted different concepts, really high level concepts. The latest one involved, and this was at a time when I was feeling really down, and I was talking with this person about things that are happening in the world, and I can always tell when there's a shift, and this person is not them talking, but somebody else is speaking through them. And especially when I'm talking through Skype and chatting, and all of a sudden everything turns to all caps. Then I know I'm dealing with somebody higher up. Sometimes it's this person's own higher self that steps in, which we all have our own higher self that we need to listen to, and that is something that I'll get into more further down the road. But the lesson that I wasn't told is that we are here to experience. Good or bad, it doesn't matter. We are here for the experience. And I tried asking questions like, well, what's going to happen with everything going on in the world? When are things going to change? Are they going to get any better? And basically, I got my knuckles cracked with a spiritual ruler and saying, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We're here for the experience. And you don't have to suffer through something. You don't have to look for trying to make things better per se. Good and bad things are going to happen in life. Sometimes horrible things are going to happen in life. There are people who have gone through terrible, terrible situations. And not just, people on an individual level. We've had, world wars. We've had mass genocide. We've had whole cultures wiped out. And we've had individual people who have suffered from, let's say, sexual abuse or growing up in an abusive relationship with family members. These things, that's not to say we can't work to try to stop them and try to make the world better, because in a lot of ways, the reason all of these things happen is through ego and fear. All of these situations are being created by those people who are living within ego and fear and not living in a spiritual manner, being more connected to our own higher selves, and our higher selves, which are a part of Creator, God, God Source, whatever you want to call it. Many of you have probably heard the fact that we're all connected. We're all one. And that's something that I've never fully understood until recently, is the fact that, and again, I'm going to get into this in more depth as we do future shows, because some of this is really mind-bending, but we are all connected, and in more ways than people realize. And this is why we need to treat everyone of our fellow human beings with respect, with love and compassion. Jesus, for those of you who are Christian, Jesus said, love your enemy. The reason for that is because we are all connected. Even if somebody does you harm or somebody is attacking you or whatnot. Not to say you can't defend yourself, but at the same time, not letting hate into your heart or fear into your heart. Allowing yourself to go through an experience, come out the other side. Because in a lot of these situations, we learn something from that experience. If you go through life and everything is perfectly hunky-dory your whole life and you're perfectly happy, if we don't have negative experiences, what have you really learned? How have you grown as a person? When you try to protect your kids, let's say, and you tell them, don't touch that stove, it's hot, you'll burn yourself, and you want to do anything possible to protect your kids from feeling hurt and feeling pain, and you want them to have a happy life. Who doesn't? That's normal. But let me tell you something. If you touched that stove anyway and burned your hand, you would learn a lot more never to touch that stove again. And because you would feel it, you would understand the experience. It's one thing to tell people something, It's another thing for them to actually have the experience of doing it. Being here and living this physical existence, it's not meant for us to just always be happy. And that might sound counterintuitive, but happiness is a state of mind. And there are ways of training ourselves to live in what I would call acceptance. Bad things happen. If you fight them, if you get upset, if you go, woe is me, why is this happening to me? And you make yourself miserable over it. It's going to be really hard to get through. If something is happening, the one way to handle it is, okay, this is happening to me right now. It sucks, but I'm going to get through it. What can I learn from this and move on? And the older we get, we are the sum total of our experiences here on this physical plane while we're here. So we have to learn certain things. Now I'm going to bring up a subject that's going to be very uncomfortable for people. Let's say those people who experience horrible things. Let's say you have a family member, or even you yourself, you get diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. You've been given a death sentence, or you've got a very, very long, painful road. And then you turn to God and say, why? Why am I experiencing this? Why are you doing this to me? Well, the truth is God's not doing it to you. Actually, we chose certain conditions and experiences before we came into this lifetime. Now, people would probably look at me and say, why in the hell would I ever choose that? Well, from our human perspective, from our physical, three-dimensional perspective here, right in the here and now, yeah, I would say that. Why in the hell do I have to go through this right now? This sucks. This is crazy. Who would ever want this? But that's the trick here. We are spiritual beings having a physical existence. And we choose, before we come into this lifetime, to have certain experiences and conditions that are necessary for growth, for learning. We come as spirits into this lifetime to touch that stove, to burn our hand, to feel that sensation of physical pain. It's one thing to know about it as a concept. It's another thing to have it as an actual experience. Now, that's not to say that we can't get upset if a family member dies or something terrible happens. But yet it is still a matter of perspective and understanding the bigger picture of where we come from. Now, I already feel right now that there's a lot of people sitting there saying this guy's full of crap. Okay, maybe. I'm not asking you to believe anything I'm telling you. I'm only speaking from experience. I'm speaking from messages that have been given to me over time, things that I have learned. Let me tell you a little bit about my background. Okay, growing up, lived a normal life, grew up in north of Los Angeles, had my identical twin brother, Bill. He and I were born 5 minutes apart. We had my older brother, we had my parents, we all lived together, a little town called Sylmar, and, lived a normal life, although both my brother and I suffered from very bad depression, clinical depression, which back then they didn't really know how to treat. So we were very emotional kids. And sometimes my family didn't know how to handle us. It was a very hard existence living that way. It was hard, that type of depression. You hate yourself. You put yourself down. You feel you're worthless. You're not worth anything. And unfortunately, my brother had it worse than I did. And as we grew into adulthood, we started diverging off into different paths. His was a lot tougher than mine. I learned how to get past a lot of the depression. Eventually, I got on medication that really worked for me. He never really got the help he needed, and he really, really struggled with it. And unfortunately, 5 years ago, and I think a lot of it had to do with, he didn't take care of himself physically. He worked very stressful job. He was always upset and very high strung, and he had a heart attack and died. And for me, how painful that was, losing my identical twin brother, I felt like a part of me died. We were so close. And that is something that I have to deal with now. I'm going on now with the rest of my life without my other half. I married my to a beautiful wife, and she and I have the best relationship ever. We are best friends. We're super utterly close. Now, my twin brother, we felt like two parts of the same person sometimes, although we had our great differences. He had different opinions than I did. We weren't super identical in that way. Our brains, I noticed, worked very similarly, but we still were our own person. And I went off in one direction, and he went off in another. He was very religious. He went to his church. He was very caught up in that. And me, I kind of got away from the church. I started following a more spiritual path. I was looking into a lot of different concepts, and especially I was attracted towards, for a while, Native American spiritual beliefs, but now it's more like, I'll call them indigenous shamanic spiritual beliefs. That is something I'm very attracted to. I've even gone through a year of training as a shamanic practitioner for healing, and I haven't been able to use it since I've learned it, because I came back from a situation and I've been living a very physical lifetime, and I've kind of let the spiritual side of myself fall to the wayside. And part of me doing this show is to help me get myself back on track. So, losing my brother, again, very hard, and I'm experiencing life now without him. But I will tell you, I've had experiences where he's come back to me. He's come back to me in dreams. I remember the very first time I dreamed about him. It was several months after his death. And it was a very vivid dream. In fact, I'm going to say it wasn't a dream. It was a form of, astral travel or out-of-body experience. I'm not sure what to call it, but I found myself standing in the middle of this room, and it looked like it was like you're in a bathroom with white porcelain tile everywhere, except there's no urinals or toilets or anything. That was the feel of the room. And I turned around, and there was my brother standing there smiling at me. Now, you would think that, oh my God, somebody else might go, oh my God, burst into tears, hug, oh my God, I'm so glad to see you, whatever. No. This is my brother and I's relationship. I turned around, looked at him, I smiled, more of a smirk, and I said, and again, I'm going to apologize up front here, young children, parents, cover your children's ears. I said, it's about fucking time you showed up. And that's, the kind of sarcastic, joking, relationship that we had when we talked to each other and we're constantly busting on each other. And it was such a good feeling. And I know we had a long conversation, but you know what? I can't remember a damn thing about it. Can't remember it. Not consciously anyway, and I don't think that I was really meant to. I've had other dreams where he's been in them. I've felt his presence. I was even using my paranormal tools because I was a paranormal investigator for a number of years. And one time I was doing a spirit box session, and I just experimented, and I asked if my brother was here, and in a very clear voice, and it was his voice, said yes. Now, it's a one syllable word. People could say, well, it could have been anybody. You could have received a radio signal because, those spirit boxes are unreliable. Yes, I agree with all that. But it was the one and only time that it happened, and it was crystal clear, and it happened in front of another friend of mine that was with me who knew my brother very well, and we looked at each other at the exact same time and said, oh my God, that was Bill. He let us know he's here. And that's a comfort, because it's a comfort knowing that there is survival beyond this existence. It cements the fact that, again, we're spiritual beings in this human existence temporarily, and we're here temporarily to learn. We take what we learn after we've passed, and then it becomes a part of our higher self, our whole experience and existence. And then we have another coming back. You call it reincarnation. You live another lifetime. We've all lived hundreds, thousands, who knows how many lifetimes that we have lived. Some people, and I myself, have struggled with that sometimes. I've struggled after my brother's death with the concept of, oh my God, what happens when we die? And then if we do die, do we lose our sense of identity? Because if we're part of, let's say, our higher self, our higher spirit, our soul that has lived many lifetimes, then this lifetime is only one small part of a whole bunch of other lifetimes. And then it becomes kind of scary thinking, oh my God, I will cease to exist. Yeah, this higher level being, might have it might have my memories or whatnot, but it has memories of all these other people, and I'll lose my identity. And that was frightening to me for a while. And I realized, it took some time, but I realized that's ego talking. You're still going to exist. You're still going to be you. I did an interview with Whitley Strieber last year, the author of Communion. He's a UFO experiencer, abductee. He's written dozens of books on the subject, but he wrote this one book that really touched me. It's called The Afterlife Connection. And it was after his wife of however many years passed away. And he started having experiences with after-death communication with her, either coming through other people in dreams or sometimes through to himself directly when he was meditating. And there was a line in the book that just really struck me hard, because he asked, when he had a chance to talk to her, he asked her a question and goes, "Are you still Anne?" And she came back and said, "I'll be Anne for you." And what that means is that part of our soul, our higher self, our spirit, we are the sum total of all of our lifetimes. And when his wife, Anne's spirit, was talking with him, she is manifesting as the personality of who she was when she was alive, to have that communication. But all the rest of it is still there. All the rest of who we are is still there. We also get into the concept of time. This is a big one that took me a while. Time is not linear. Time doesn't exist. Time is a man-made concept. We look at life linearly. Had to work on my pronunciation there. We look at, we're born, we live our lives, we die. Okay. That is how we can understand life. That is our concept of life. But in reality, even science is starting to find if you look in theoretical physics, the idea of string theory, physicists like Neil deGrasse Tyson, Dr. Michio Kaku, they talk about that all time is happening at once. And with that idea, there's the concept of we're living all of our lifetimes at once. So all of these different lives, it's not like you live a lifetime, you die, and then, a couple years or so you come back and you live another lifetime and then you die. That's how we look at it from our human perspective. But from a spiritual perspective, it's all happening at once. And that's very mind-bending. It's a little hard to wrap your head around, but it's true in that we are experiencing everything at once. And that message has come through from a lot of people who have had near-death experiences or who have channeled or have had after-death communication, not just coming from me. And it makes you take a step back and really look at our lifetime here and look at the experiences that we're having. Lifetimes are supposedly planned out. And we're here to have certain experiences. And some of those experiences are very bad. But again, as I mentioned with the analogy of touching the hot stove, you learn from that. You will learn something from that. All of the experiences I've had of losing my brother, I learned from it. The experiences I've had through my life, I've had a couple of failed marriages before I met my wife, who I've now been married to for 16 years. And I'll call the other ones practice marriages. God, I never should have done what I did. But you know what? If I hadn't have done it, I could sit here and complain what a miserable experience it was, how stupid I was. Why did I allow that to happen? How did I get involved with these people? I can bitch and whine and moan about it, or I could sit there and look back and see how those experiences made me who I am today. I learned from those experiences. I became a better person because of those bad choices and bad experiences. You can have someone who's let's say a drug addict or an alcoholic, and they struggle with addiction all their lives. Some people are able to pull themselves out of it. Some people are able to get that help. But they've learned from that experience too. They learned from being down, and sometimes you have to hit rock bottom before you're able to pull yourself up and learn from it and move on with your life and try to do better with your life. The same can go with living in a state of fear. Fear controls us. We still have that primal animal instinct in our brains that hold us down at times and keep us from advancing or looking at other people in fear or worry or cause us to hate. And you know what? I'm guilty of it. I am absolutely guilty of it. I've wallowed in fear. I've wallowed in not exactly hate per se, but I've been angry. I've been angry at certain situations. I've been angry at people. I've done and said things I'm not proud of. We can't sit here as a society and keep pointing fingers and keep looking for someone to blame or hate, because that is not going to get us anywhere. We all need to come together. We are one human race. We are all one. We are connected, and we are all connected because we've come from the same place. We've come from the creator source. Call it God, call it the goddess, call it, supreme being, the creator force, whatever you want to call it. It's where we've all come from. We're all extensions of that higher Godhead being, Think of it as I'll use an example, as a peach. Peach has fuzz all over it. So little things of peach coming out. And each one of those hairs coming out of the peach is one of us, a soul going out and reaching out and having an experience. And then from there, I look at that hair branching out. Think of it like an octopus with tentacles going out, and each tentacle is going out into a different lifetime or a different universe, a parallel universe, or on another planet, or whatnot, having all of these experiences. But it's all, in the end, we came from this creator source, and we are going to go back to that creator source one day. This is how we're all connected. So we have to find that way to get all of our human conditioning, the prejudices we've had instilled in us growing up, and even the programming that is currently going on now with our media, with our politicians, with certain, groups going around and pointing fingers at somebody else and saying, you're the cause of my problem. We got to stop it. How about we look at our problems and we try to work together to solve the problems and have rational discussions and talk about it. And instead of looking at somebody as the enemy, looking at that as another fellow human being that we need to be able to talk to. Now, there are some really crazy people out there, or people whose minds are so warped that we're never going to be able to get through to them. And that is part of our experience right now. In the future, from what I've been told and what I've been reading and whatnot, things are going to change for humanity. There is a lot of talk about us moving on as a species to a higher vibrational level. We're living in a three-dimensional world right now. Actually, 3 and 4th dimension because of time. But we can move on to the next level, next vibration, moving into the 5th world, where we leave all of this negativity and all this crap behind. We're still living in a semi-physical experience, and not everybody is going to be able to advance at the same time. But we're going to get there. We're all going to get there eventually. This is why we keep coming back. This is why we keep learning things. There was a great science fiction novel that I read back in the 70s, and a lot of people haven't heard of this one, but it was written by 2 science fiction writers, Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle. Larry Niven is known, he's wrote the Ringworld series of books, so for you sci-fi geeks out there, you'll know who I'm talking about. But they wrote a book called Inferno, and it was based on Dante's Inferno, the epic poem. And most people know, it was the epic poem known as the Divine Comedy. And there were 3 sections to that poem. And most people who know of it only know the first one, Inferno, which dealt with a metaphysical journey through hell. And eventually going all the way down to the very bottom of hell, coming out of the end of hell, and then going up and through purgatory, and then eventually up into heaven and paradise. But the most interesting one was Inferno, the hell. Now, what was fascinating about this book was it was about an author who lived a very ambivalent life. He died. He wound up in the least worst part of hell, but he wound up in hell. And he meets a guide, and together, because they have knowledge of Dante's description of hell, they knew they were going to escape from hell. And they were going to go all the way down through, and they had to go through all these different levels, and things, would get worse and worse as they went, watching all these people having this suffering and experiences. But in the end, they reached the end of hell to be able to escape. But the overall arc of the story was really a story of redemption. And it told how people are keeping themselves in that state of hell. They're creating that own hell when they have the power to move past it, get out of it, move on to the next level. And I thought it was a really entertaining analogy of our lives and what we can do with our experiences. We can go through the bad. We can go through all of these experiences, but we have a destination in mind and a goal in mind and it will get better and we will raise up to the next level. But we also have to put in the work. We have to start looking at ourselves more as spiritual beings. There are ways of connecting with our higher selves. There are ways of connecting with our guides or other spirits, helpful, compassionate spirits, people that are there to help us, other higher level beings, ascended masters. There's a lot of terminology out there that when I hear it, I cringe because it's placing human labels on things that I don't think, really, really work. I mean, human language is so limiting. And, this could even involve, and I'm going to say it out loud, and some people are going to scoff, but even on the extraterrestrial level. And again, I say this from so many people that I've interviewed through the radio shows over the years. And that's the one thing I've been blessed about doing these radio shows now for almost 10 years now, is all the different people that I've gotten to interview about their own experiences. Even though I may not have had a personal experience, I get to talk to people who have had these experiences, and it's helped me realize how our version of reality is just an illusion. It's an absolute illusion. And different types of phenomenon are more interconnected than we realize. I'll mention Whitley Strieber again. In his books, he has mentioned the fact that he has encountered people who have died while he has been aboard these craft during an abduction experience. And that the visitors, as he calls them, seem to be very much involved with us on a soul level. There are a lot of other people who talk about, a lot of other experiencers who mention that we are all interconnected and living multiple realities at once. And so it's hard to say at times, are we dealing with aliens? Are we dealing with angels? Are we dealing with, higher level guides or whatnot? I don't really know a lot of the time. And that's something that we're going to explore together as we continue with this show. But there are ways to communicate. There are ways to connect. You don't need a channeler. You don't need to go consult a psychic. They're very iffy to begin with. Most channelers and psychics, I've talked to a lot of them, and a lot of them, I think, are a little too much in their own ego and not really as connected as much as they thought. I've met a couple that are scary good. They're really good. And some people who have the strong gift and they don't really want it or want to use it. They just want to live a normal life, and yet sometimes these things will come out. But one of the ways that we can start off by learning to get in more in connection with our higher selves, with our spirits, with our souls, is through meditation. This is one of the things where Eastern philosophy really needs to gain more of a foothold here in our Western society. We are so focused here in our Western society on physical things, on money, on consumer goods, on ego, and we don't turn within. And we have to listen to our voice within. Our higher self is there to connect with and help guide us. We have our other guides or, guardian angels or whatever you want to call them. We have our spiritual tag team of people who are there to help us. But it takes us to listen We have to learn to quiet our minds and allow this information to come through. And let me tell you, it's more subtle than you think. And some people get it. Some people who are very psychic or sensitive get it, and they get it loud and clear. Other people like me, I think I'm not getting anything. I think I'm not hearing anything, or nothing's happening. I can't turn off my monkey brain and the chatter when I try to meditate. But you know what? You got to practice. You got to keep trying new techniques. You can't sit there and expect to hear a voice in your head. Sometimes it's a fleeting thought. It's an idea. One thing that I do is I'll sit there and I'll ask questions out loud. And I'll try to keep them to yes or no questions. And I've learned that if I ask a question, the answer will instantly pop in my head almost every time. A yes or a no. And then I'll feel it in my gut that that's true, that that's the right answer. Occasionally I'll ask a question and I won't get an answer at all. Nothing will be there. In those times, either the question's not phrased right, or it might be a question where you're really not supposed to know the answer at this time. Because we're not supposed to know everything. As much as I want to know all the mysteries of the universe right now, while we're here in physical form, it's not going to happen. We are only given so much to work with right now, and then we got to work through it. And there's a lot to learn, but we have to evolve. We have to evolve beyond our current state. I'll use another analogy. There's Hopi and Navajo lore. Prophecy talks about how, and there's this famous rock in Arizona. And I forget exactly what it's called. I'm having a brain freeze right now. But it shows through petroglyphs how the Hopi people came out into this world, what we call the fourth world. There were 3 worlds before this. Supposedly those worlds were destroyed or something happened and they had to move up. And the legend says that they came up out of the earth into the fourth world. Now, eventually we're supposed to move on to the 5th world. Well, that kind of coincides with what I mentioned earlier about humanity with changing our energy and our vibration, moving on into a new dimension, the 5th dimension, different plane of existence. And makes me think that this prophecy is talking more about not physically coming up out of the earth or from one world to another, but a progression of humanity advancing spiritually and energetically, and then moving on to a new phase of existence. You know, this rock, prophecy rock, that's what it's called, also talked about really dark times and past, and it showed that we could go in a couple of different directions if we're not careful. So this is why I feel it's really important, and why I'm doing this show, to try to connect with people so that we can start this dialogue. We can start to look within. We can try to find ways together of getting past the fear, getting past the ignorance, the ego, and looking at everything from a spiritual perspective, and having us as a human race try to come back together throughout all of our differences, our cultural differences, our religious differences, our value systems. But we are all still one people. It doesn't matter what damn color you are, sex you are, orientation you are. Who cares? We are all in this together. And we need to start treating each other like we're all in this together. You know what? I could be driving along on the freeway or on the street and somebody cuts me off, and my first reaction is to flip them off and call them the A word. Okay. Well, that's just ego stepping in and like, how dare somebody do that to me? Or one of the big things people talk about is disrespect. Don't you disrespect me? Well, that's ego talking. everyone should be treated nicely. Everyone should be treated equally. But if someone disrespects you, does that give you the right to like turn around and wail on them or turn around and treat them like crap? Jesus said, love your enemies, turn the other cheek. He was talking about looking at it from a spiritual perspective and loving humanity and trying to get us into a space where we all can come together in a place of love, in a place of community. I think we were better off sometimes living in small tribal units than we are right now with 10 billion people on this planet living in huge gargantuan cities, and people don't connect, and our faces are plugged into our cell phones or our computers, and everyone is isolated. And of course, this pandemic certainly hasn't helped, where everybody's really been isolated, and we don't have a sense of community anymore, and we need to find that again. And I think a lot of it is going to have to start by us looking within ourselves, finding that spiritual side of ourselves, and then using that and projecting that outward in order to connect to other people. And if we start slowly reaching, one person at a time, that's all it takes. One person at a time, and then growing from there. And I'm not talking about everything being all love and light and hairy-fairy and whatnot. Love and light is part of it. But, you also can't live with your head so far up in the clouds that, you're not watching where you're going either. There is a certain part of being grounded. But at the same time, there is a way for us to reach that level where it is more love and light and understanding and working together than all of the conflict that we're currently experiencing. And that, that's very important. Now, we've come into the end of the show here. And I know I've rambled on about several different topics, and I've touched on a few things that I really wanted to get more in detail. And going into future shows, I'm going to pick a topic, and we're going to talk about that specific topic. And we're going to get into some really, really deep ideas. I want to try to find a way eventually to open the show for guests, and to even if we're in a situation where we can do call-ins, and I want to talk to people. I don't want to just sit here and listen to my own voice. I want to be able to have interactions with people and share ideas. I don't claim to know everything on what's going on. I'm on a learning journey like all the rest of you. I've learned some things that I want to share with people, but at the same time, that what I've learned needs to evolve. It needs to grow. I think I'm just reaching, the tip of the iceberg, and it's something that I'd like to do with other people. So this is the purpose of this show. And as we go forward in the next few weeks, and I'm going to try to do this as a weekly show, we're going to hopefully be able to find some ground together and do something to help raise this level of vibration for all of us and help us become more connected and get past the fear and everything that's going on right now in the world. So with that being said, I want to thank you for tuning in to the first episode of the Astral Perception Show. And boy, did I screw that up. The Astral Perception Show. And I leave this stuff in because, you know what? I'm human. I'm going to screw up. and I'm going to try to keep it that way. So thank you very much for tuning in. And we will catch you all next week. I would love to hear your comments on Facebook or Twitter. You can find our group Astral Perceptions on Facebook. Leave some comments. You can even leave comments. Or you can find us on Spreaker, Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Samsung Podcasts, everywhere you can find us. Have a great night, everybody, and we'll talk to you again soon.